So this guy's walking by, lifting up his key, right? It looks like he has a black eye. He's walking by with his coffee, and then he wants to put his key like as in the up position.
We feeling
Is that not a black eye? You know how certain people get a black eye for whatever the Hollywood thing is.
live
As he's looking directly at the camera, lifting up his key to the upward position
facts.
with Penn Center Building 8. I mean, who knows? Maybe the next RV will start setting warning signs off at 8:38 a.m. about 8:48 a.m. in order to go away and get out of there when the next bombing happens, because that's exactly what they're leading you to understand what's going to continue to happen.
Minutes on this Christmas Day, we really appreciate it. Pretty remarkable breaking story there in Nashville. We've seen some incredible footage now that appears to be from the street, and it relates that investigators in their latest press conference revealed was coming from this RV, warning within 15 minutes a bomb would go off, and then indeed there was an explosion. There were shots fired that drew police to the area before they found that RV. Your thoughts on the way this came to happen early this morning and what it means about the perpetrator or perpetrators?
Well, I want to say Merry Christmas to you. And I have to tell you now, viewers, what we have witnessed here this morning in Nashville, Tennessee, is nothing short of a Christmas miracle. It is a miracle that no one should, at this stage that we know, was actually killed as a result of this explosion. It's a miracle. It is nothing short of a Christmas miracle. It is a miracle that no one should, at this stage that we know, was actually killed as.
And then, when nobody's looking, people are throwing cups of glass out on the ground, like, watch out! And it gives time to get everybody out of there. And maybe those buildings don't, maybe what it represents from the old, maybe they need to go. But they only need to go if nobody gets hurt doing it. Because what is it really? It's a demolition. Who the hell cares about a building? Unless people are in there and they die. But with the World Trade Center, it was a demolition. It was a planned demolition.
We feeling the effects for days.
This outcome justifies the deed this time around. If I could see it happening before it happens, then what I'm telling you is nobody's dying either. So you would clearly believe that. If that thing happened tomorrow.
But I think we're going to rebuild. We're going to reclaim what is Nashville. This is a historic part of our
On
city.
YouTube,
We need
since I
to
started.
bring it back.
That would be something else. It'd be quite a gift. Quite a gift. Because all you're going to do is rebuild it. You have all the means to rebuild whatever it is you need to rebuild. Whatever building we agree on putting up there.
We're going
This
to
time it
rebuild.
represents
We're going to reclaim what is Nashville. This is a traded, but I think we're going to rebuild. We're going to reclaim what is Nashville. This is a historic part of our city. We need to bring it back.
And an update now to the AT&T outage affecting so many people. Well, the company says it continues to make progress and has started to restore power to the facilities in the building damaged after connecting generators through the walls. They hope to have the equipment back up online in the hours ahead. So far, service in the Lexington, Kentucky area has been restored. Head to WKRN.com for the latest on the
Nashville earlier this morning. If you're just tuning in on this Christmas day, here's what we know as of now. The explosion happened at around 6:30 a.m. local time. Nashville police say the blast was linked to a suspicious vehicle in the downtown area. They're calling the explosion a, quote, intentional act. However, the FBI is not making that determination right now. Our CBS affiliate in Nashville reports at least 3 people have been hospitalized. However, the FBI is not making that determination right now. Our CBS affiliate in Nashville reports at least 3 people have been hospitalized. Nashville's mayor says at least 20 buildings have been damaged. And President Trump has been briefed on the situation and will continue to receive updates. Ms. Bernstein, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. Based on your years of experience, what strikes you most about this incident? I know Chief Spokesman for the New York City Office of Emergency Management. He's also a former Obama administration counterterrorism official. Ms. Bernstein, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. Based on your years of experience, what strikes you most about this incident? I know we're still very early on in piecing it together.
Right. Well, Tom, thanks for having me on. I think the first thing that strikes me about this incident is that it doesn't seem designed for the typical carnage that you would see out of a ISIS type attack or an Al Qaeda inspired attack, where really the main focus of the attack is to wound and kill as many people as possible. Having some type of a device go off on Christmas morning very early in a part of the city that is not known necessarily for a tremendous amount of residential traffic or foot traffic seems like it's an attack. If it was an attack, trying to send a message to somebody more than actually wound or kill.
They're professional demolition. They know how to demolition buildings. They know how to blow them up. They know how to create the bombs. They know how to create the images. They control the fire engine, the fire, police department, everything. They can make it happen easily. They buy all of that land, like I told you, all the land around the World Trade Center, all the businesses.
Which is what you see sort of out of some of the other type of attacks
out of
the Middle East.
So they can all run, and they can all get contacted to do a certain thing and do this and that, and don't come here on that specific time. That way they can control it and make sure nobody dies. They just make sure that they can instill fear into everybody.
Or inspired by ISIS or Al Qaeda ideologies.
Well, you bring up a good point. This happened at 6:30 on Christmas morning. The only people who seemed to be in the area, frankly, were the first responders who were headed to the scene for shots fired. Is there any potential that this could have been a target against police or first responders?
No.
Since the beginning of police and firefighters, there have always been people in the world who wanted to take a shot at them. One of the things that officers and firefighters and EMTs and everybody in the first response business is always looking for right now is, where is that secondary device? Where is that secondary attack? So even if you're walking into a 911 call for shots fired or for domestic disturbance, you always have to have your threat awareness radar on, looking for what else might be out there. And that's possible that what they were looking to do here is target first responders, who unfortunately are always a target. And it looks like in this scenario, the police who responded to this initial call did a very...
Were the ones that...
thorough search. They saw...
Is that a pit? Did something come up from out of the pit?
Something that didn't seem quite out of... It seemed like it belonged, and they were able to start clearing out residents and bringing in specialized units to neutralize the threat. In this case, the device, assuming it is a device, went off before that could happen, but the authorities were able to clear people out of the area, which saved a lot of lives this morning.
I also want to dive to one other thing that you said about potentially this explosion being
Now maybe
send a message to someone or a business or something. Are investigators going to be scouring perhaps social media and asking kind of surrounding buildings if they've received any sorts of threats? Is that going to be a key part of this investigation as we move forward?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There's going to be a multi-pronged approach here that's going to look at social media, known antagonists, known extremist groups that are active in the Nashville area, and then a door-to-door search and door-to-door questioning of everybody in a multi-block radius, which is sort of very 19th century, the way this detective work is done. But talking to witnesses, talking to doormen, talking to maintenance personnel and all these businesses about something that looked out of place, and then going door to door to all these business owners and taking advantage of any surveillance video that might be stored for the last few days, the last few months. Because what we know about these types of attacks is that they're usually very well planned, and that the perpetrators make several trips to do reconnaissance on whatever they're targeting before they put a plan like this into motion. And so chances are, if this happened, it was not the first time the person who did this was on this block. And so if you could piece all of those things together, you could oftentimes have footage of that person on camera, or somebody who noticed somebody who didn't seem quite in place on this block.
It wasn't me. I was here, and then I went to Reading, so I wasn't in Nashville.
It's not necessarily a block. It would be known for being an RV park. So it's something that would have stuck out and made an impression, particularly on Christmas Eve, right? So there's a lot of high tech where you're looking at Twitter and CCTV cameras, but there's also a lot of low tech shoe leather, detective work that goes on. That it's the same way it would go on if it was 1920 as it is in 2020.
That's interesting. I also just want to ask you really quick about the materials that potentially could have led to this explosion. So obviously this is a huge explosion where the debris radius is blocks and blocks and blocks. This isn't some smaller kind of, pressure cooker situation like what we've seen in New York City in the past. What are investigators going to be doing when it comes to piecing together what the materials were used? How big of an explosive device, if it is in fact an explosive device that was used, how big that would be?
Well, what they're going to do is, and if they're not already on the ground, they will be in a matter of hours. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms at the federal level has experts who spend their life's work learning how to reconstruct incendiary devices. And so if the consensus so far is that this came from an RV or a recreational vehicle, what they're going to do is go in blocks in either direction and try and piece back together that recreational vehicle and figure out what kind of an accelerant was used to turn that vehicle into a bomb. There's lots of things in a vehicle that you can make blow up. There's a gas tank.
So Hooters sign prevailed, and the Dick's sign back down the street are the only two signs that are still up.
There's lots of metal paneling that you can use as shrapnel, so you don't need a tremendous explosive device to turn that vehicle into a bomb. And so what the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, along with the FBI and the state and local authorities will do is they will literally reconstruct this vehicle based upon the wreckage, usually out at an airport hangar somewhere, where they have lots of room to work, and they will try and put it back together and make it, a complete a package as possible, and from there gather a lot of clues. For those of us who are old enough to remember the 1993 first World Trade Center bombing, the way the perpetrators were caught was that the FBI and the New York City Police Department were able to reconstruct the rental van that was used as a bomb and actually catch the perpetrator who went back to the rental company to get the deposit back.
The Nashville Convention Corporation raised its reward for information to $37,000, bringing the total to more than $300,000. Right now, a citywide curfew is still in effect.
$300,000 is the reward. If you can find out who did this, like who's responsible for this, how much
so
would
you just get to, how fun is that?
I would be.
How cool is that?
To find out who did it? Oh man, I have no idea, so I wouldn't. I mean, whatever. It's only money.
and parts of downtown are still blocked off following the explosion. Witnesses say they could feel the ground shake from miles away.
News Nation crews were there today as agents combed through the home just about 15 minutes south of downtown Nashville. A source telling the Associated Press that someone linked to the property is considered a possible person of interest. Over the course of a few hours, federal agents carried out several items from the home. Now,
I just can't help but to think that that's going to be my side door next.
Nashville police say the explosion damaged at least 40 buildings in the downtown area. The security shows windows being blown out as the RV explodes. And we're getting a closer look at some of the damage to nearby apartment buildings. 3 people were hurt in the blast. They are all expected to be okay. Also tonight, we're learning more about the heroic actions of 6 Nashville police officers who are credited.
So these are all the guys and gals that are, well, I'd say responsible for saving lives in Nashville. Brenna, James again, Amanda, Michael, and Timothy.
Credited with saving lives. They responded
on Gay Street and Church Street and Bank Street.
The calls of shots fired before the bombing, and that's when they heard a recording that issued a warning about the explosion. This morning, a U.S. District Attorney commended them for their courage to rush in and evacuate the area right away.
Metro Nashville police officers just a number of blocks north of here didn't run away from danger, literally ran to danger. Vehicle that was announcing that it was going to blow up, and Metro Nashville police officers, instead of heading in the other direction, headed towards that.
Tonight,
well, I mean, when you know it's going to blow up, then you're going to know that Commerce Street, 2nd and Commerce.
officials confirmed they did find human remains at the scene of the blast. They're promising to leave no stone unturned as they work to determine a motive. News Nation has crews covering the. They're promising to leave no stone unturned as they work to determine a motive. News Nation has crews covering this story from all angles. Reporter Chelsea Benford is following the FBI and ATF searches just outside downtown Nashville. But first, we check in live with News Nation correspondent Tom Negaman. Tom.
And you know, Aaron, they are calling this a miracle, a minor miracle, but only 3 people were injured as a result of this explosion. Investigators, though, at the scene here, not quite ready to talk about those reports of a possible person of interest, even as they converge on that home you mentioned.
Now, maybe
10 miles southeast of here.
Didn't happen back then. Maybe really everybody really.
The investigation right now, this secondary scene in Antioch, Tennessee. The FBI won't talk about what they're looking for here or comment yet on who they might be interested in.
We have over 500 investigative leads, and we're following up on every one of those. So there are a number of individuals that we're looking at.
So is that the 450 at least that are giving their assessment on what they think is going on here? The building that's built represents that peace deal.
The explosion rocked downtown Nashville around dawn Christmas Day. The device concealed in an old white RV, detonating near an AT&T transmission building on the city's busy 2nd Avenue, home to a row of bars and restaurants.
Hey, wait a minute, where's Robin at? I don't see him on the wall over there. I guess they didn't want to show it. Robin Realtors.
The RV eerily playing a recorded message, counting down to the impending blast. Tennessee's governor today appealing for federal help he says will be needed to rebuild, calling the damage shocking, saying it's a miracle no one was killed. 3 people suffered just minor injuries, but there's still no clarity on human remains.
Same about the second 9/11 in Philly and Christmas being a gift. Well, that's only if nobody really dies. And it's exactly the way that I've seen it happen, which is the holographic images at first. It's only if nobody really dies, and it's exactly the way that I've seen it happen. Now, I don't know about any holographic images on this one, but they're clearing the path, and the way things are set up, you just look on the ground to see how things are. But it's different with a high-rise building, having images up at the top, and then when the building actually comes down. This is different because you'll actually be able to walk through and see all the damage.
On this case, on finding out who would do this and why.
So I just get to be the guy. So anyway, I'm going to give you what he gave me.
Find out what happened here to get the answers that you deserve and to make sure that we're all safe.
I don't know what's with the sunlight there. Spotlight.
Now, as you may recall, there was a lot of concern here initially about the possibility of a secondary explosive device. The FBI and ATF working hard to reassure people today that they did a thorough sweep of this entire area of downtown Nashville. Found nothing. Still, obviously, a lot of questions here. Curfew in effect around the crime scene. It began yesterday afternoon. It's in effect until at least mid-afternoon tomorrow.
If I could see it happen before it happens, then what I'm telling you is nobody's dying either.
Now, on the RV, I think one of the most fascinating headlines out of that news conference is that there was this announcement, a kind of warning emanating from the vehicle, and that in itself may have saved a lot of lives in this case, Tom.
Yeah, it's certainly a fascinating detail. We'll have to see what other details emerge with regard to that recording. So I want to talk about the device at the center of the explosion. What are you learning about from the FBI about that, Catherine?
Well, I spoke with a former senior ATF official, someone with 3 decades of experience, Scott Sweetow, and who also worked with something called TDAC. This is the FBI's, these are the experts and the TDAC. Worked with something called TDAC. This is the FBI's. These are the experts and the repository for information about improvised explosive devices. I want to emphasize we don't know yet what was involved in the explosion in Nashville. And Scott Sweetow pointed out to me that if there had been sufficient explosives to eviscerate to vaporize, if you will, this RV, it would have to be hundreds of pounds of highly explosive material. And he also emphasized that if that had been the case, you would have seen, because of the amplification of the impact of that explosion, a lot of building collapse in the area, as well as a very large crater surrounding the explosive site. So these are all sort of details that caught his attention. We haven't had a full look at the scene yet. We certainly don't have any idea about the forensics, but I thought that was important context as we wait to see what this investigation reveals.
And we should also point out that in that...
Yeah, even my son was looking at like, well, how come the whole entire block is like blown up, but there's no center point where there's like a big explosion, like a circle crater, but yet all the way down the entire block on each end is like blown up.
Presser, they mentioned that there was no information on a body inside the RV.
Correct.
They do not know if anyone was inside at the time of the explosion.
Number 1, L3 Eve 4.
Interstate commerce target, as well as, or perhaps in addition to, individuals who were involved. And that, of course, would come from things like that surveillance video.
Find out who's responsible for this, particularly as no one has claimed responsibility thus far.
Nashville's mayor said, quote, "This morning's attack on our community was intended to create chaos and fear in the season of peace and hope."
If I could see it happen and before it happens, then what I'm telling you is nobody's dying either. So you would clearly believe that. If that thing happened tomorrow,
what his or her intentions might be. So the choice of 6:30 a.m. Christmas morning is a deliberate choice that tells us that we know the roads won't be crowded with pedestrians or car traffic. So the intention seems not to be aimed at killing people, but rather perhaps sending a message to the office or office buildings in that area. Secondly, we see a desire to draw the police in through this call for suspicious gunfire, which, by the way, might be part of the recording. The sounds that we're hearing from witnesses that they heard of gunshots might even be a recorded message, just like the warning to evacuate. But nevertheless, it brings police in. So there's a decision here being made to not hurt people right away, Now,
This
here's
is it,
what we
before the
don't
fire.
know, Kristen. We
I
don't
wanna
know
just
if that means
first
that this is
extend
over, that his target
happy
has been achieved, and that
celebration of
he's
the birth of the
satisfied with
Messiah
what's
Day.
happened, or whether this is a warning. I can play with the police. I can bring you here. I can choose at my time and place to hurt or not hurt, and that would mean there's more coming.
And Frank, it was announced pretty quickly that the FBI would be leading this investigation. Is that an indication that this was an act of terrorism?
We should not draw any conclusions from this other than the fact that after the 9/11 attacks, it's now presumed that something of this size and scope and this magnitude of damage will be terrorism unless it can be disproven. That's a reverse of the attitude that took place before 9/11. So don't read anything particularly into this, that there's an international or domestic group tied to this, but rather that we're likely to see federal charges. And I would assume that the U.S. Attorney's Office there would be thinking seriously of a weapons of mass destruction charge because of the magnitude of damage done here.
Physical examination is taking place right now to find out who is responsible for this, particularly as no one has claimed responsibility thus far.
Nashville's mayor said, quote, this morning's attack on our community was intended to create chaos and fear in the season of peace and hope. Do you agree with that assessment?
And all get contacted to do a certain thing and do this and that and don't come here on that specific time. That way they can control it and make sure nobody dies. They just make sure that they can instill fear into everybody because they're miracle signs and wonders.
Do you make of what the message could possibly be here?
Well, I think the mayor is exactly on target, no pun intended. You couldn't pick a better day than Christmas. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. People are staying at home. You can't see relatives, you can't travel, and now here we have an intentional explosion that occurs on Christmas Day. So I appreciate the mayor and his comments, and especially his comments about the community's resilience. He's already committed to rebuild the area.
This time it represents the 2-in-1 system, the actual truth of knowing the truth now. And that one is raised up because the old is being destroyed. Titus is destroying the temples because he knows that the new temple, third temple, the real one, is here. Maybe those buildings maybe what it represents from the old, maybe they need to go. But they only need to go if nobody gets hurt doing it. Because what is it really? It's a demolition. Who the hell cares about a building? Unless people are in there and they die. But with the World Trade Center, it was a demolition. It was a planned demolition. But to make it more exciting.
Typically, these incidents occur for a couple of reasons. Number one, to invoke fear, and most importantly, to send a message. And the message was sent. Was that send a message, and the message was sent. Was that send a message, and the message was sent. Was that here it is, the holiest day of the year for most religions, and it happened anyway.
I want to just first
Mr.
extend
Summers, thank you so much for your
happy
analysis here, and we'll check back in with you a little bit later on in the show. We appreciate having you.
Thank you for having me.
Birth of the Messiah Day.
They really pooled the public for help. How could that assist as we're just beginning in this investigation?
Well, there was a report earlier that a police officer had to shoo away someone walking their dog in that area. Well, maybe someone was walking their dog at 5:30 in the morning when that vehicle was pulled up and saw it.
Where's the fire? Smoke. I see the fire, but I just don't see the smoke.
Dog at 5:30 in the morning. Well, maybe someone was walking their dog at 5:30 in the morning when that vehicle was pulled up and saw it.
Maybe it's just really light and faint.
We have businesses have cameras. Residential buildings have cameras.
Will lead. It might even be the subjects. So that's an incredible lead. It might even be the subjects, including possible DNA that could possibly be a match in a DNA laboratory. So that's an incredible lead. It might even be the subject's tissue, which means he committed suicide or was destroyed in the bombing. But there's a massive amount of work to be done here because of the AT&T presence. I would start with a team going through all complaint calls, all of the letters and chronic complainers to that particular office and location of that company, because that could tie us to a motive. But again, motive isn't really going to drive this investigation. It's the hard physical evidence, security cameras, CCTV, eyewitnesses, et cetera, that's going to solve this case.
Chief John Drake quick to credit the 6 officers who first encountered the RV, each rushing to clear the area and get nearby residents to safety.
They went with their gut instinct and immediately began evacuating people. We'd be talking about a lot of people seriously injured had they not taken those actions.
The AT&T outage disrupted not access and grounded flights at Nashville Airport yesterday. Full restoration could take days, as some residents across Tennessee and in parts of Georgia, Alabama, and Kentucky are cut off from cell phone and internet access.
Cleaning up all of this debris, a lot of the folks who live here that I've spoken to have compared it to a war zone. Kate?
See, so far I haven't heard anybody compare it to a second 9/11 or even a first one. So that's why it's not second 9/11 in Philly. This is the wrong prediction. But this one here is pretty correct. It's half. I got half of it.
Morgan, thanks for being there for us. Our other top story tonight for millions of Americans, the economic impact of the pandemic has been devastating, and federal assistance a lifeline. Now that federal assistance is about to run out. Benefits are set to expire tonight because Congress and the president are deadlocked
Get ready.
over COVID relief legislation.
It's all happening now.
Across a pandemic-ravaged nation tonight, reality sinking in. Insurance programs that would have been extended in the relief bill now expire, cutting benefits for some 12 million Americans. Millions more could be put out of their homes in January. The federal eviction moratorium is the next major program to expire on New Year's Eve, if the president doesn't act. Nicole is watching that deadline too.
Come January, I probably won't be able to make my rent payment.
On the president's desk, the bipartisan bill his administration helped negotiate, which he now refuses to sign. This bill is critical. It needs to be signed into law now.
And Garrett's with us now. Garrett, what happens if the president doesn't sign the bill?
Well, Congress comes back to Washington on Monday, and Democrats will try to pass those